right, welcome to the session with the title, What's New? Introducing the Business Foundation and the Number Series Module. My name is Jesper Schultz-Wedde, and I'm an architect on the Business Central team. Most of my time was spent on driving the GitHub code development story forward, but I'm also very engaged in the componentization of the business application, which is what we're going to talk about here today. And to help me with that, I've brought Andreas.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Andreas. I've worked on Business Central for the past 10 years, been working both on application and in client. Right now, I'm focusing on system application and business foundation that we're going to talk about today.
All right, so let's jump into it. What are we going to talk about today? I'm going to be spending a few minutes introducing the business foundation. Why do we need it and how did we create it? And then Andreas is going to tell you a little bit more about the first module that we have in the business foundation, which is the number series module. Why did we pick that module? Which user experience improvements did we make? What are the changes to the API? And how do you need to uptake those changes is the main topic that Andreas is going to cover. And then we're going to wrap up with a very short call to action and call it a day. So let's start with a small story, and for that we need to go all the way back to the beginning. Well, not all the way back to the Big Bang. No, dinosaurs is also a little bit too far back. Here we go. Some of you will remember this good old Dynamics NAV. If you go 7 years back in time, you would find something like this. There's a monolith application which has grown organically over the past 25 years. Local versions were all built as modifications to our W1, the so-called worldwide version. And before you could implement the solution at a customer side, you would add verticalizations, customer modifications, and so on. So no two implementations of Dynamics would be identical. So the beginning of the story that I want to tell today starts with introduction of extensions, or as we call them today, apps. So the introduction of apps started a paradigm shift, where we went from the good old code customization model to the new extensibility model. And Microsoft, as part of that, formulated a goal that we all need to get rid of the customizations in favor of apps of different types and shapes and sizes. And you were asked to convert your code into repeatable apps going either to app source or into PTEs, per tenant extensions. I guess you're all following along so far. So that idea was launched, and everything was bliss, everything is great, woohoo, moving forward. Well, maybe that is idealizing the facts a little bit here. Because with the transition out of customizations and into apps, new challenges arose. And if you've ever built an app, which you probably have, you'll recognize some of these challenges, I hope. So maybe you want to build an app, but you don't really have access to the right places where you can hook into the base product. You might be missing some interfaces or an event or even some public procedures. So if you've ever been to on AL App Extensions, the repository where you can log extensibility requests, you'll know exactly what I mean. And then one thing is, that you don't have the right places to hook into, but also the features that were built for a code customization model aren't necessarily built with extensibility in mind. So the feature is not really designed to be extended. It's a challenge too that we face. Also, we still have many subvariants to cater for. I guess the most common subvariant is localizations that you're all aware of. So just because you build an extension that works great in the North American version doesn't necessarily mean that it works fantastic with the German version as well. So that's a challenge that we run into as well. And then there is the undocumented APIs. So even if you find the place where you want to hook into, there's no real documentation. There's nothing for you to read, how does the system behave exactly at this point in the code. So what you in reality need to do is you need to read the code to understand how it's working, which can be extremely time consuming. And sometimes, also because it's not very clear where you need to hook into, you might tap into hooking into implementation details. And those are very, very hard to spot. And the problem is, when you do that, then the chances are the product will change and your extension is going to break. So all of these were challenges that came with us formulating the goal of moving to an extensibility model. To address these changes, the Business Central team decided to re-engineer the application from the bottom up. So we wanted to break the monolith, so to speak, and reimagine the application as a collection of smaller, functionally coherent modules. And that's how the system application was born, which has been around for a couple of years now, which in reality just is a collection of small modules, small apps, combined into this new logical layer. So now I'm mentioning modules. Let's remind ourselves what's a module, because that is also what we're using for the Business Foundation. In essence, a module is just a set of objects. The difference to other sets of objects, though, is that these need to be functionally coherent. Modules separate concerns. And that's the first property, really, of a module. It's coherence. So how do we separate concerns and ensure coherence? We split the functionality into an app of its own. So bottom line, a module is an extension. So why are we not calling it an extension? Well, it's because we're at the bottom layer and we're not really extending anything here. So we came up with the name module, but think of it just as an app. But there are a few more properties to it than just that. One of the key differences is that a module encapsulates complexity. By using the access modifiers, we keep the implementation details hidden away. You cannot access these. But that gives us the freedom to change the internal implementation at will without risking breaking you, as it was the case before. Then how do you access those internal workings? Well, we provide you with a facade, which is a stable API that is not going to change. It has nice XML code documentation so that you now no longer need to read the inner workings or understand the inner workings of a module. You simply need to understand the documentation on the facade and you'll be able to consume this module, which is a much, much better place to be than where we came from. So summing up the advantages of a module, they separate concerns, they are functionally coherent, they have stable, well-documented APIs exposed through facades. They encapsulate complexity and hide implementation details. They have a smaller attack surface, which makes them easier for us to secure. They are faster to compile, which is a very, very nice side effect. And also very important, particularly to me, is that their size and clear purpose allows for more focused discussions and hence also make them more suitable for a contribution model, which is very much what we're looking at. They're also easier to performance monitor and test. And at some point, they also will allow for individual versioning and effective upgrading. We're not there yet, but at least they are prepared for that. So also, I don't know, lately there's been a lot of talk about Solid, so I figured I mentioned some of the points here. Solid are the first 5 principles of object-oriented design. So a module out of the box supports single responsibility principle, meaning it has only this one responsibility. It has the open-close principle, meaning that it's open for extension, but it's closed for modifications. You don't necessarily need to implement the interfaces if you don't want to, and so on and so forth. So it's a good step in the right direction, also into the object-oriented world. So now that the system application was introduced, everything is bliss again, right? Now we're there, everything's great. Again, I'm afraid that that's not entirely the truth, because the introduction of the system application brought its own set of challenges with it. So first of all, even though the new layer was architecturally superior to the old monolith, the process of ripping out capabilities unfortunately left a lot of dependent apps broken. So breaking changes were everywhere when we first introduced the system application. And it quickly became apparent that we cannot keep working like this, especially not if we want to get into the more, should we say, business-focused processes such as number series, because we would just be breaking everyone and impose a huge amount of work with every release that we would make, where we would build these modules. So we needed to come up with some solutions. And 2 of these you should know. If not, let's quickly repeat them. The first one is that in the beginning, an app took a dependency directly on the base application and directly on the system application. And that means if something moved from the base app to the system application, you would have to update your apps. It's a breaking change. We hence introduced application redirection, which means that all of our logical layers come under an umbrella called application, which you find in the app.json. And if you take a dependency on the application in its entirety, now things can move between all the apps that are under this application umbrella. So that was the first thing we needed to do. Now, unfortunately, as you will also see later when Andreas is talking about the API changes that we decided to make for a very good reason, sometimes we do need to make changes and we do need to, go away from something old to get to a better place. But of course, that needs to be announced. So when we move some things out of the base application into a different logical layer, and we want the old implementation to go away, then we of course needed to have some way of conveying that information. So we introduced the deprecation scheme, where we're going to tell in version this and this and that, this is going away and this is coming. This you should also know by now. We've been doing that for a couple of releases now. But ideally we do not want to deprecate, because deprecation always also inflicts work on you, the partners. So it should be the last resort. And having things under this application umbrella, as I mentioned, was the first step, because now you can move just about all objects between apps. But there was one object that you couldn't move, and those were tables. So table, when they had to be moved, needed to run upgrade code, and the old table needed to be deprecated, and so on and so forth. With 2024 Wave 1, that's a thing of the past. At least in this version, Microsoft is able to move tables between apps without being broken. So all the apps depending on the table object will be blissfully unaware that the table has moved logical layer. And that was a prerequisite for us to be able to move ahead in our componentization efforts. So, given those capabilities, we're now ready to tackle the more, shall we say, embedded modules. And that's why we felt we're ready to introduce the business foundation, which squeezes neatly in between the base application and the system application. Very quickly, it is a horizontal ERP-related functionality, which is used by all on none of the application domains. So it's all these general ERP concepts that you will find there. It's built as modules, as we talked about. There will not be localizations. If we need localizations, we're going to make extensions. It's developed with zero depth. We're developing it the way that we want the system architecture to be. And all the tables are going to be moved in a non-breaking way. So what's the business foundation then? Well, as an example, we could say address management, currency management, dimension management, which is a very interesting one. So it has all these management things given time. But we need to start somewhere. And for that, we chose to start with number series management. And there's some good reasons for that, which Andreas is going to cover in a minute. I just want to make one final, important statement here, and that is that everything that you see here today was developed as true open source. It's the first module that we developed as true open source. And that means that if you go to GitHub, you'll be able to find introducing a new business foundation layer. And you can see, we had like 246 conversations with the community about, how should this be developed, or like changes that are needed. And I think we ended up with like 250 commits, yes. So you can go here and you can read all the gory details, look into all the code reviewing process that Andreas went through before deciding that now this is ready for release, and we think we've covered our bases and everyone should be happy with this. So that's a great change, and we hope to be, of course, seeing much more of that way of co-developing our features in the future. But that was it from me. So Andreas, why don't you tell us a little about why we chose number series?
Yes, thank you. So let's talk about why we chose number series. Well, number series has a high uptake around the product. So that means it's useful both for us and for you as partners. It's also not too big or too small, so we want something that we can actually move, but that also brings business value to it. And it has a great opportunity for improvement because it's been patched around quite a lot. So here we have a lot of things we can really improve. Furthermore, there are also tables that we are going to move, and this way we get to verify that we can move tables, which in the end will benefit you as partners who can now go ahead and in the future will be able to move your tables as well. Now, let's take a look at how does this actually look inside of Business Central. So you're probably all familiar with Business Central, and in here I can go to the number series page. When I'm here, you'll see there's a few new options in here. We both have an open lines fact box as well as a relationship fact box, which allows you to very quickly see what are the open lines for your different number series and what relationships have you set up. So you don't have to drill in for every single one in order to find these. As well as we've also promoted these actions, so it's very easy to access. On top of that, we've also added this ability to see expiring number series. What we mean by that is these are number series that don't have any open lines or are in warning state. What I mean by warning state is, on the number series lines, we have this warning number. If the last number used is within that warning number, then we're also going to show that. So in other words, these are lines, these are number series that you want to take action on before they run out or you can't use the product properly. Furthermore, we've also been working on improving our error messages. So we've actually, in the new API that we've introduced, all the error messages are now actionable error messages. So to show you an example of that, I can go to the customer number series, and let's say we close this number series. So I'm just going to copy the last number used here to the ending number, which means now I can no longer create any customers. So if I go now to my customer list and I say create a new customer, you will see I get the error, you cannot assign any new numbers from the number series cost. Now, because I have permissions to set up number series, I'm presented with an actionable error message that allows me to go into the number series lines, see those, and I can fix that in here. So now I click Open Number Series Lines. I'm presented with the number series for customer, and I can see, oh, this one ended, so maybe I want to update the ending number, or more likely that you want to provide another number series line in here. So in this case, let's say we started from C100, and let's now go back into the customers, create a new customer, and everything works. I can create my customer, call Andreas, leave, and without leaving the customer list, I was able to actually go and fix this right away without having to first go number series, find the correct number series, go to lines, fix that, and then go all the way back. So this is one of the very nice fixes, and as I mentioned, we've actually updated all our error messages in the new API to use these actionable error messages so you can go and fix it right away. So I've been talking a lot about the new API. So how does that actually look? So let's take a look over in VS Code and take a look at the code itself. Before we actually dive too much into the code, I want to quickly talk about why did we actually decide to rewrite this to create a new API. And if we take a look at the old implementation, we will see here in number series management is the one that used. We have a lot of functions, and it's not always obvious what function you want to use. For instance, for getting the next number, which is the most used functionality of number series, that's its purpose, we have the function getNextNumber, getNextNumber3, doGetNextNumber. We have getNextNumber1, we have getNextNumber2, tryGetNextNumber, getNextNumber after run, and yeah, so basically there's a lot of functionality for just getting the next number, and as a new person, what should I actually be using and how do these work? Furthermore, if you look at doGetNextNumber, we have this parameter modify series, and what this does is you can provide this with false, which means you actually just want to see what is the next number without updating the number series. However, you can also use it to batch your changes. So that's another reason to set this to false, to get a bunch of numbers and then save all of those in one go. So this does multiple things, and there's several things to be aware of that I'm not going to go into details about here, but it's you have to really be careful of what you're doing here.
And I assume none of this was documented before, right? I mean, you would have to guess which one or read the code to understand which one of these 5 or 6 options you had to choose.
Yeah, it's not very clear what you want to do. Exactly. So now instead we have split this into 2 code units that we want to use. So we have the number series and number series batch code units that this has been split into. Mainly you want to use the number series code unit. This code unit is your main go-to. It contains getNextNumber, getPeakNextNumber, getLastNumberUsed, and it updates the database right away whenever you get a number, and it just works out of the box. And as you can see, I already mentioned peakNextNumber, so we no longer have this modify parameter for getNextNumber. If you want to check what the next number is, you simply call peakNextNumber, and we're not going to update anything in the background or keep any state about that. Furthermore, there's a bunch of helper functions, as you can see here. For instance, you can check whether 2 number series are related, or you can look up the related number series, so let the user pick a related number series. Now, we also have the batch code unit, as I mentioned. Batch is what you want to use whenever you want to get a lot of different numbers in very quickly after each other. The batch is gonna keep the state in memory whenever you get numbers and only save at the very end when you call save state. It has the exact same functions as the number series code unit, so you can get next number, peak next number, get last number used. And of course, it's gonna be all based on this number. You can get numbers from different number series, from different dates. You can run out of one line and run into the next line, and it's gonna handle all of that for you. And just at the very end, call save state, and we'll save all of these back to disk. And this is the most performant. So when you need performance for getting numbers, this is the go-to code unit. Finally, we have this function, simulate getNextNumber, that previously was hard-coded in a lot of different places. Basically, you have a number, this was usually on journals, that you wanna, for the next line, you want to increment the document number by 1, but you didn't want to actually increment the number series itself. You just want to say, hey, based on this was the previous number, please give me the next number. And that's exactly what this does. You provided a number series as well as a usage date, and what should it assume the last number was, and then it's gonna give you the next number without updating anything in the number series itself. So this is quite useful, and I'll show you some examples of where you actually want to start using this as well. Now, this is basically how you would use number series, but what if you have your own implementation? Like, let's say you want to override how something works, or you want to, basically, you want to control how we get numbers. In that case, we have this enum called number series implementation, which specifies what are all the implementations for number series. And in here, you can add your own implementation as well as provide the implementation details. So use this interface here, and then it will show up in Business Central. So this interface is very easy to use, actually. We have three main functions, which are pick next number, get next number, and get last number used. Very clear what they do. And finally, we have whether your implementation is likely to produce gaps. And this is because some business scenarios are not allowed to produce gaps, so we need to know that so we can show this to the user. Now, once you have added that, you can actually go back into Business Central, and your implementation is going to show up here in the implementation column. You can now switch to your implementation instead and start using that. That's it for the implementation. Now, I've talked a lot about how the new API looks, right? So you're probably wondering, how about, do I need to uptake this right away? Is the previous stuff gone? Is it still gonna work? How long does it work for? And so on. So first of all, there are no breaking changes in this. We are using the normal obsolescence process as for every other feature in Business Central that you're hopefully familiar with. That means the old legacy code has been obsoleted with version 24 and will be removed with version 27. So that means until then, the old functionality is still gonna remain functional and work exactly the way it is. Of course, we have already converted all the Microsoft code to use the new API. Now, how do we actually use this new API? So let's take a look into how you would actually start using that. First of all, we have, in case you have this delayed insert, so you get that next number, but you actually don't want to modify it yet, because here we are just checking whether the next number is equal to your document number. And in that case, well, then we want to save it. Here you can simply use batch, you say just get next number, and if that is the document number you want, you can modify, you can save the state. Of course, you could also use pick next number if it's not important to update the number series afterwards. Furthermore, we've also made some things much, much simpler. So some of you might be familiar with our batch posting. In here, we have this number series management, which is an array of 100 number series managements. And we use all of these in order to cache the number series and not fetch them multiple times from the database and get performance out of that. However, this is quite convoluted. It's not very simple to do in other places, and basically it doesn't look too nice, and we have a limitation of 100 number series. Now, you're probably not gonna run out of that, but why have a limitation in the first place? With the new API, all you need to do is create a number series batch, get the next number, and save state at the end. As I mentioned before, it's gonna handle if you change the number series, if you run out of one line and run into the next line, change states, and all of that is gonna have handled automatically. Next, we have some examples where we are now more explicit. So for instance, or actually the init series function has been completely removed because it's not super clear what is going on. In this case, this is for the bank account where we actually want to first set up the number series and then get the next number. What is actually happening, which is much more readable down here in the new code, is we are actually checking whether the GL bank account number series is related to the number series of the previous record. If it is, well, then we want to continue using that number series. Otherwise, we want to fall back to the bank account number series setup in the GL setup. And then afterwards, just get the next number as usual. So this is a few more lines, but now you can see what is actually happening. And for new developers, this is easier to read and understand. Finally, we have this simulate next number, as I mentioned. In a lot of places, we have this functionality. This is taken from the journal batch, as you can probably see, where we have the last document number, and now we want to create a new line. So we want to figure out what should the next number be. In here, we call into number series management to figure out what line to use. Then we check whether that increments by more than 1. If it does, we call back into number series management and ask it to increment the number by this amount. Otherwise, we just do an inc string, and if the number series doesn't exist, we again just increment by 1. This, again, is going to be much simpler. You can simply call simulate get next number, given that the previous number was this document number and this number series, please increment it. And you will get the new number without having to do all of these hacks. And yeah, I want to just quickly highlight, you'll see here on GitHub, we have this refactoring to use the new number series module. And this one provides examples of how to uptake the new code. And we would love to help. If there's any other things that we need of examples, please reach out and we can update this document and make it much simpler for you guys to uptake this new number series module. And that's it for me. Back over to you, Jesper.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for this very detailed deep dive into the world of number series. So we only have a few minutes left here, so quick call to action. Very important one, though. Please start uptaking these changes now. Don't wait until we actually remove the old number series legacy API, because do get next number series and try get next number series, they are going away because they make no sense. So get on the forefront, make the refactorings. And as Andreas said, we are always eager to help. Just let us know if we forgot anything and we'll be there to assist you. And if we might have forgotten something in the API because you did not know that this was co-developed on GitHub, the code is still out there on GitHub. You can just go there and you can add to the API, you can suggest changes and so on and so forth. Let us know what is missing and we can work together on making this the best number series module that we possibly can. Now, we talked about co-development, but there's one code that we didn't really mention, Copilot. So where's that? Well, we didn't get around to do the Copilot support quite yet, but our MVP Dimitri Katzon picked up on that and said like, hey, now we have this new awesome module, I would like to contribute and make a Copilot support for this one. So he is actively working on that. If you go to the BC Apps repository into issue 659, you can see the entire discussion going on, and very, very soon Dimitri is going to post this first pull request, and you can tag along on how Copilot is implemented for this brand new module. So if you want to learn something, here's your opportunity. And then also, of course, componentization of our base application is going to continue. We have not really landed yet on which are the next modules. We also need to focus on Copilot to a large degree. But we are going to continue. So keep your eyes open for new pull requests on GitHub, because, of course, it's going to be developed out there. And that was it from us. Thank you very much for sticking with us and learning about number series and the Business Foundation. And I really hope to see you on GitHub. So see you there. Thank you.
See you.